Hi, welcome to Podcasting for Profits and Long-Term Loyal Clients. My name is Suzie Price. I'm with Priceless Professional Development, and this is a talk that I gave in Scottsdale, Arizona, January 2018, and it's at the TTI SI International Conference. So I'm going to start today with a little bit about my path to podcasting, and then I'm going to go into some very specific areas, problems that it helps solve, obstacles for you to overcome, and other suggestions and tools and resources, and I even have a resource tools page that I'm going to share. But first, let's just talk a little bit about my path to podcasting. So it was January 2004, and I was feeling on this particular day energized, determined, and vulnerable all at the same time. My stomach was flip-flopping, and my breathing felt shallow. What was I doing? I was meeting with my attorney to set up the LLC paperwork for my business. My next stop after my meeting with the attorney, my mixed emotions going with me, was to open up a P.O. box. I paid for a year's rent on a P.O. box, and I set up the creation of a logo and my first website. Nervous, excited, wondering the whole time, what are people going to think about this? I mean, are people going to think I'm crazy? Am I crazy? I think this is the right thing. Is it going to work? And even with all that mind chatter and those mixed emotions and my less than perfect first logo and website, I had a knowing that starting a consulting business was my next best step. A consulting business was the answer for me for the best way to use my talents, best way to make a difference in the world, best way for me to feel on purpose and in charge of my life, to feel in charge of my schedule, to feel in charge of the money that I was going to make. And so I didn't know at that time exactly what I was doing and how it would all turn out. Everything I had done up to that point in my career, in corporate organizations, and in my education had led me to this point, and I felt like I was ready, even though I was nervous. So that was 14 years ago, and things have turned out better than I could have imagined. I have amazing clients. I have awesome work, things that I love to do every day, cool colleagues that I get to hang out with, making the money that I want to make. I have freedom in my schedule, and I really am living the Wake Up Eager life that I talk about in my business so much. I do wake up eager. And so much of what's happened over the last 14 years have been learning about how to run a business, how to be a great consultant, how to be a great facilitator, all the external parts and pieces of our business. And also there's been a big internal journey, me learning how to get out of my own way, me learning how I can be my best and bring my best to every interaction and every engagement. And so as I grew personally and professionally, I began to look for more ways to express and share my insights and share more of what I was learning. I wanted to express more, share more, and find avenues to do that. I had a website, I had a blog, I didn't know what was next. At the same time, I wanted more warm clients. So I wanted people who were already interested in me, so I didn't have to do a hard sell. I don't like to push. I wanted there to be a pull by the prospect. I wanted to be able to stand out from the crowd. So at that time, it seemed like there were consultants everywhere. I used to think that. I was like, is everybody a consultant? Does everybody do what we do? So I wanted to stand out and wanted to find ways to do that in my marketing. I wanted to add more value so I could create more loyal, long-term, multiple project type of clients. While doing all of this, doing what is natural to me, which is talking, sharing knowledge, and creating things. I like to create things. So that's when the idea of a podcast came about. Now, I first listened to a couple of different podcasts, but the one I remember the most was listening to Rob Wolf. He had a podcast, or has a podcast, called the Paleo Solution Podcast, and he wrote the book, The Paleo Solution. And at that time, paleo was just coming out and getting, more on the mainstream conversation. And I was very interested in the content. Then, as I listened, I was interested in how well he did his interviews and how easy it was for me to listen to him while I was doing other things, driving, doing the dishes, walking the dog. And over a short period of time, I began to feel like I trusted him and I knew him and that we had a connection. And if we met, we would be friends. So I thought it was interesting. He's in my ear for an hour or two every week. And it was helpful and likable, and so it's interesting of the connection that I made with him. So I was thinking about audio, and I liked the format, and I remembered many years ago at one of the TTI conferences early on, Bill Brooks talked about Brooks Group talked about how he was creating audio files as follow-ups to workshops that he would teach. And I tried that. I made some audio files for some of my programs, and it kind of worked, but I eventually abandoned it because there were so many technical challenges 10 years ago, 10 or more years ago. But it did get me thinking that there might be something for me in podcasting. And so then I started listening to podcasts about podcasting. And one of the people that I listen to often and have used as a podcasting coach, he is all about podcasting. He's a podcasting expert, is Dave Jackson, and he has something called the School of Podcasting, and he has a members site that I am on regularly on Facebook, and just very helpful resource to getting started. So I had a few things going for me. I had technical skills. I had journalism major, and I loved to learn, but I didn't know what I didn't know, and at times getting started felt like I was walking around in the dark. Anytime I was going to fall into a hole, going to take a stumble, I didn't know what I didn't know, and sometimes that was stressful. So now, it's February 2015, and I'm feeling energized, determined, and vulnerable all at the same time. My stomach is flip-flopping, and my breathing is shallow. Guess what I'm doing? You guessed it. I'm about to hit the publish and make public button on my first Wake Up Eager Workforce podcast. And I had completed the podcast, had it edited, loaded the show notes, and I was nervous all over again about taking this next step. Now, my interview skills and the audio quality on that first podcast, they were not perfect. But just like in 2004 when I started my business, I had a sense that podcasting was the marketing tool that I had been looking for. And I have a podcast. It's called the Wake Up Eager Workforce Podcast. And I have published 42 episodes so far. 40 are live, 2 are in the can. And during those podcasts, I've interviewed several clients. I've talked to TTI colleagues. I've talked to best-selling authors. I do a lot of my own content, so it's a mix of interview and just content. I have 11,000 downloads so far, and I expect that to grow exponentially as we have a solid process for promoting new podcasts and adding new podcasts all the time, and we promote all the old podcasts regularly, so there should be growth in those downloads. On my website, what I see now is I get 608 new visitors a day, 1,800 to 2,700 daily page views, and 56,000 page views a month so far on my website. And all of that is just an indication that more people are finding PricelessProfessionalDevelopment.com, and they're finding it by way of the podcast, and once they find it, they stay on the website. So that is all good news when we're talking about podcasting and where it has taken me so far. So I'm here today because I want to share with you three things: the problems podcasting has solved for me, the biggest obstacles and how to avoid them, and 3 mind traps that could hurt your success. So if you're considering a podcast, I want you to gain some of the benefits that I'm finding. I'll go into a little bit more about the benefits and avoid some of the pitfalls. I also have created for this group an online link. It's pricelessprofessional.com/podcasting 2018, password Wake Up Eager, and you'll see it on a slide in a minute. But there, all the tools that I'm going to talk about and all the resources and the video and audio version of this talk are available on that webpage for you. So let's look at the first one, the problems podcasting has solved for me. Well, the first problem is it's a crowded marketplace. How do I stand out? So let's look at comparing websites to podcasts. There are 1.24 billion websites worldwide. There's a lot of websites. Everybody has one. You need to get traffic to it, right? There's 2 million blog posts per day. And there are 250,000 active podcasts. And here is a very interesting, so big difference between how many blog posts there are and how many active podcasts there are. There are 42 million Americans listening to a podcast weekly. That is a pretty cool statistic. That means that 15% of the U.S. population is listening to a podcast every week. And if you think about how often people go to a movie every week, 3% of the population goes to a movie every week. So those numbers about podcasting are on the rise, from my understanding. And this is a great statistic. It's from my media host. It's a podcast that I like to listen to called The Feed. It's a podcast about podcasting. They said that for every 2,000 blogs, there is one podcast. So if we're looking at a way to stand out, podcast versus a blog is one way to do it. When you say that for every 2,000 blogs, there's one podcast. In regard to standing out, one thing that I have found is when I'm working with clients, and one of my objectives is to make them more loyal, every proposal, every engagement involves an additional set of podcasts or audio resources that back up whatever we've been discussing. So we're adding more value, and they don't get that from everybody that they interact with, so that's another way to stand out. As my skill set grows, I add more value to my clients, and with podcasting, what happens is it forces you to codify your programs, systematize them, lay them out for people in a short format. And so I'm learning all the time. I'm getting better at talking about what I do and how we do it and refining that. And I'm also learning more from the different people that I'm interviewing. So that helps me stand out. It helps me stand out in social media. So we're pretty active with social media because we're always adding material that is, the podcasts are content rich. So there's value in those. And we'll talk a little bit more about how we do that as we go forward around the social media. And I'm positioned as an expert because I'm aligned with the Amazon Way best-selling author, Harvard Business Review best-selling author. I'm aligned with some senior vice presidents in influential companies who I've interviewed. Or my clients, we make a better connection because I've interviewed them. Or some people who are considered gurus in the industry around culture. All of that helps me stand out. So podcasting has helped me solve the problem of so many people in the field and has helped me stand out more with my clients and prospects. Next problem that podcasting has helped me solve is overcoming a long sales cycle. How do I find more warm leads? I don't like to push. I like to pull. And I'll tell you a quick story. You remember that first podcast that I talked about where I had a less than perfect audio quality and interview skills? Well, that was a podcast with a client. She was certified as a CPBA, and I featured her and her whole process. We talk about what she went through and how she's using it and how hard it was. And she loved being featured and doing the interview. She was the first one. And so she and I cultivated a stronger working relationship. And then I got a call many months later from a learning and development executive who wanted to have 4 of her folks take the DISC certification, and they were considering several different vendors. And I sent her a copy of that podcast, less than perfect, remember. And the next day, they went ahead and ordered the 4 certification packages. So it created a shorter sales cycle. They were listening to not Suzie talk about this certification, but a fellow learning and development colleague. And I believe that made the difference. So the next problem that podcasting solves is creating more work with current clients. So keeping them loyal, making sure they know what I do and how I do it. And so let's look at that. You know how when you book a team engagement and you have 10 executives that you're getting ready to go see, you've never met them, you've been talking to your sponsor, in my case for this company it's the CEO, you've done everything you can to be ready. When you first walk in the room, usually there's a little bit of, they've all taken assessments, and so there's a little bit of breaking the ice and reducing tension, just getting them to come along with you. Well, in this particular case, they weren't reserved. This is what happened. Now, of course, that was the high I who came in and hugged me the minute I walked in the room. But everybody said, we already feel like we know you. We've all been listening to your podcast. And so, one of my thoughts always is, we're always pre-paving. We've always had the meeting before we've come to the meeting. So how have we been thinking and planning and prepping mentally, physically, energetically? And so the podcast pre-paved and had the meeting before I even got there because we had a great meeting. We would have had a great meeting anyway, but we didn't have to do as much breaking of the ice. They had greater trust in me before we even started because they've been listening to me and how I work on the podcast, and they liked it, and it resonated with them. And so it was a great day. The CEO said, hey, this meeting today has exceeded my expectations, and over the next year and a half, that was a year and a half ago, they've spent $120,000 with me. Now, it's not all just because of the podcast, but that was a piece of the puzzle about building trust and credibility and having a very effective day with these folks. All right, so those are 3 of the problems that podcasting has helped me overcome. Helping me stand out, a shorter sales cycle, and building more trust and credibility so I have long-term loyal clients. Now let's look at some of the obstacles and how to avoid them. So the biggest obstacles. Well, they can seem and feel really big in the moment. Isn't this a great picture? Some of the details around podcasting when you're first getting started are very overwhelming. So let's look at the first thing is getting started. Now, I'm going to talk about some different things. I'm just going to mention them here, but here is the address, pricelessprofessional.com, podcasting 2018. It's a /after.com, and it's podcasting 2018. Podcasting is lowercase, and the password is wake up eager, all one word. So getting started. Here are some of the tips I have for getting started. Listen to podcasts in general, to listen to how they interview. One of my favorites is the Tim Ferriss Show. I love how he interviews. He's amazing, and it's very interesting to listen to. So listen to how other people podcast is one thing you can do. And listen to podcasts about podcasting. So I'm a big fan of the School of Podcasting podcast. He comes out with one every Monday. He's entertaining, and he's always talking to many levels of expertise in his podcast. I also recommend that you get a podcast coach. I am not a podcast coach. I am an executive coach, and if you want to partner on some kind of executive corporate gig, perfect, but not about podcasting. I'm just barely scratching the surface on it. But I do suggest tapping a resource, and I've got 2 resources on the tools page. Make sure you just get basic equipment. You don't need anything fancy, and I've got a list on the web page. Make sure you get a media host. I use Libsyn, Libsyn. Also, there's a link on that page about Libsyn. You do not want to host your audio files on your WordPress or any other website. You need a separate place to host those. They will get you started and get you on the right path, so you're not having to go back and untangle that. So I think I pay $20 a month. They also have helped me. I have an Apple app, and I'm looking at an Android app, or we're working on that. The other thing that helps me tremendously is I write out and script every episode. So I put all my thoughts together. I'm not getting my thoughts together on the fly. I'm getting them together so that I can be detailed and have a logical flow. And then I go off script often, of course, but I have a plan for every podcast, and I think that makes each podcast, I'm thinking about my CEO, my favorite client is going to listen to this, or my SVPs are going to listen to this. So I don't sweat the details so much. I don't think it has to always be perfect. I want to be me and be transparent and authentic, and I do some goofy things sometimes on my website, on my podcast, but I do script it in beforehand so that I'm prepared and that it's well thought out. Another obstacle to getting started is finding time. I probably now spend 3 to 5 hours on each episode. One thing I do to save time is I use an audio editor. The group I use is the podcasting group. Link on the tools page for you to him. It's $70 to $90 for each episode. I record it, then I put the media file into Dropbox. He picks it up on Dropbox, edits it, and then I also have a professional jingle, which you can hear when you go. You'll hear it. I've got on the site there. I've got a professional jingle that I made, and there's a source that does that. It's very inexpensive, like $50. And then I do show notes, and I make sure that the show notes are like a blog post, so they're very detailed. I spend more time on them because I see them as adding more social media footprint because we make them search engine optimized, and I've gotten help with that. Shauna Adinolfi is our client services manager, and she does that for me now and does a great job, and you'll see examples of that if you go over and look at the podcast. So get help and know that it does take some time, and it'll take less time the further along you get going on it. But at first, it takes a good bit of time. The next obstacle that podcasters face is increasing their listener base. So I have a website tool that I use called SiteSell, and they have taught me search engine optimization and make it easy, and they make sure that my site gets seen. That's why I'm getting 56,000 monthly page views. It's because we're doing some stuff right on our website, but it's because of that service. And again, I hate to keep referencing it, but I've got all of the tools on the web page there. Shauna does headlines for every one of our episodes. So she takes key points, and we put our heads together and pick the ones we like the most, and then she shares those. She rotates all the podcasts from number 1 to 40 on Hootsuite, which is an aggregator that helps you schedule your tweets, and on LinkedIn. I also use the podcast, share them, what's new or related topics in my monthly newsletter. I also share the podcast in proposals. So if I'm doing a conflict resolution training class, then I say they will get an audio recap, and it's a podcast, of the materials, because I have a podcast about what I teach in the conflict resolution. It's very detailed. I use it with prospects, as I talked about with the DISC certification. When I'm on a coaching call and say a client is struggling with time management and they're overwhelmed, we'll talk about whatever their goals are and do our regular coaching call, and often my follow-up will be to send them to a podcast I did around how to get out of overwhelm. And then I just make sure that every podcast is related to topics that my clients need, problems that they're facing. They're going to help them, and then they just seem to share it. So those are 3 of the biggest obstacles, and a couple of tools and tips and resources to help you move that boulder out of the way. Now let's talk about 3 mind traps that could hurt your success. The first is someone might steal my ideas. A lot of consultants worry about this just in general. So if you're going to do a podcast and now you're going to lay out your process and everybody can listen to it for free, that may be the biggest mind trap that you might worry about. And this is my take on it. It's probably pretty non-traditional, but my thought is nobody's going to know you even have great ideas if you don't share them. So don't hold back. I've never held back. I share my processes. I share if somebody asks me, I share, and it has not hurt me one bit. They're all ideas, but there's only one you. So idea is good, and they might get something from it, and if it helps them, awesome. But there's only one you that can deliver it and be there with them. And the other thing is if you share and you're transparent and you share information, they're thinking, wow, she shared so much value in this podcast. Imagine what's going to happen when I hire her. I mean, if you want to stand out, that's a way to stand out. And there is such a thing as reciprocity, and most of you are familiar with that, which is, basically positive and helpful actions are rewarded. And while I don't share on the podcast expecting, okay, what's my immediate reward I'm going to get, I do think that people want to give back because they're receiving. And here's the other thing. If you hold back, your podcasts are going to be boring or they're not going to be helpful. So you need to be, entertaining or educational or inspirational. But if you hold back, you're not going to be any of those things. And your podcast could be boring, uninteresting, and sales pitchy. I say put it all out there. All right, next mind trap. What if everybody doesn't like me? This is why I was nervous to push that publish button. It is a vulnerable feeling. I've kind of gotten over it now. It's kind of like when you first were speaking or first coaching calls. Everybody's not going to like you. They're just not. And I'm okay with that. I'm getting more okay with that every year. And I tell you, I work with clients who appreciate me. And if they don't appreciate me and don't like who I am or have criticism about how I work, maybe they're not my client. And that's a way to vet them. Then Chris Young talks about, the never going to get it. And they're never going to get you probably. So I don't chase them. I don't care if they don't get me. I don't give them any attention. So I just say figure out who your peeps are and give them what they want and what you want to deliver and talk about. Be you. It's the whole reason we're in this business, right? Is to serve others, but also be ourselves and bring that to the table. And so this could be a mind trap that can stop a lot of people in their tracks, and is more vulnerable when you're podcasting and you've got this recording that everybody can hear over and over again. So that might be something to think about and work through. The last mind trap is, I'm not a podcast star. I must be doing something wrong. So if you do what I recommend, which is listen to podcasts about podcasting, you're going to find that everybody else has a ton more downloads. I'm a little baby in the field, you know. I mean, my downloads are good to me, but they're nothing compared to real podcasters who do this full time. They're going to talk about sponsors. They're going to talk about Patreon. And you might think, well, dog, I'm not doing any of that. But here's the deal. Podcasting is working for me, and my total focus is to add value to my clients and build trust and interest with prospects, not be a podcasting star. I want to be a consulting star. I want to be a wake-up eager, priceless professional development star to my clients, and that's all that matters. So if I get huge downloads, and I do believe that they're coming, I think that there is more here that's going to come about in my life and in this business and with this work and with podcasting. But you know what? That's not my main measure of success. And it is the success of meeting the needs of my clients and all the things that I've talked about today. So in closing, it has been a fun journey in my business since 2004, in podcasting for 2 years, 3 years actually. And from when I hesitated to publish a couple years ago to today, 40-plus episodes, 11,000 downloads, and I can't wait to publish the next one. I have a million ideas of things I want to do, and I'll get to them. And it's just been a fun creative project and a great business builder. So here are some top 3 benefits for me, and they're not related directly to podcasting because it's all intermingled with the fact that I've been in business for 14 years and I've built momentum. But today, one of the benefits is every client I have is a repeat client. They've done 4 or more projects with me over the last 3 years. So I'm not running around trying to look for new clients all the time. They just keep coming back. And I think that's as a result, or piece of it is the podcast. My sales have more than doubled in the last 4 years, and my social media presence and connections have doubled. So I'm way more active than I was before with not much effort. And I do feel like I've just scratched the surface. So if you have questions, if you're listening to this and you want to reach out to me, you can look on this webpage and look for my contact information, Suzie@pricelessprofessional.com, and my office number, and all of that good info is right there at pricelessprofessional.com/podcasting2018, password Wake Up Eager. Take care.